Okay, so let's talk about the Grizzco Dualies, which is certainly one of the weapons of all time, if you will. First up, the paint. Normal shit to repaint here. I'm rolling to that side by side. What the rolling does also doesn't only give you a higher fire rate, but also a higher range. A bit similar to glue gas. That's the only other dually where we also have that effect. Yeah, higher fire rate and higher range and result higher damage. The damage itself, I have unfortunately not found the time yet to look at the actual determined parameters, but I'm pretty sure it's just the same as the actual splat dualies. As you know, 5 frames per shot when you don't roll and 5 frames per shot when you roll, or DPS of 300 to 450 respectively. And what this Grizzco Dualies adds then is, I mean, I've mentioned the range things. The range when you do not roll actually is basically comparable to Sploosh range. I'm not hitting this here. I'm not hitting this hit here. I'm jumping, I might like just barely hit it. It kind of feels worse than Sploosh range, honestly, but this could be because of the RNG, I guess. This RNG goes crazy here too when I'm jumping, so yeah, do not fight the hits like that at all. Instead, do this, or rather this. Or alternatively, this. But yeah, before we get into enemy matchups, for about how the weapon itself works. These rolls are, I believe, the furthest rolls out of all dualies ever. Place myself in a lane here. Basically, it goes like 1.5 forward, or in any direction, with whatever you go. You have to be careful with falling off ledges or rolling into enemies or stuff like that. It's tricky, like you do need enough space around you to make the best use of them. Really unfortunate with this weapon premiering on, you know, Umami Ruins, which is technically the wrong map for it, kinda. Then the other thing while you're rolling is you get this blast here, this explosion. This basically can be thought of as an extra, except even bigger, for like 25 more damage. Here it's 125, the extra itself is just 100, there you go. And you get that exactly at the point where you start the roll, not where you ended, where you started. I'll show it right here. No damage on this tram, but if I start next to it, get damaged. If I'm like halfway to it, then it will get like fall off, if you will, like the outer radius of the blast. Less than 125, and it can even fall under 100. New shot, yeah, there we go. Since I haven't looked at parameters, I do not know what exactly the min is. It can be under 100. Do not necessarily plan with 100 for things that are far away. And if you wonder how often you can do that, it's 9 times. What you're also seeing there, it costs 2/3 of my ink tank to do that and then some. However, what does not use too much ink is shooting while rolling. Whenever you wanna do damage to things, ideally you are in fact rolling. It's more DPS and more range, and it does not actually use more of your ink than firing normally, so there's no downside to it. You're just paying for the single roll to start it, pretty much. Potentially for additional rolls if you want to reposition while still firing. Yeah, the positioning with this weapon anyway, it can be challenging. I certainly have not mastered it yet. Because, you know, roads are like really wide. You do need to know range well, the spacing, and the maps that you're playing on. If you like wanna roll in place, which is certainly something you could be interested in, say gorillas when the small fries are coming. you can do is like roll to the side and then back, like this. To the back and forth as well. But yeah, not this way ideally, of course, because typically enemies will be right in front of you, and if you roll into them, they're just gonna kill you. So be mindful of that, and when you're rolling to another side in order to quote-unquote in place roll, try to not drop off ledges. Or, alternatively, you have like good walls or the basket itself, then you can also roll into them, roll in place like this. Yeah, the more often you do it, the more ink it costs. So probably just used for the clearing, honestly, and actually DPSing things next to is a main weapon, ideally. I mean, theoretically, if you like chain a lot of these explosions, they should have more DPS than the main weapon. Of course, you can also combine the two. One way how you can also combine them is when you're dealing with groups of lessers. Small threats and chumps, you can just roll through them and you're gonna get them. But with coax it's a bit different, you see here. They're not even 3-shot by this. 1, 2, 3. They'll hit it with the main weapon by accident. 3. Okay, that is what the numbers would normally add up to. So you do need actual weapon shots in combination. I've demonstrated that really well by accident, I would say. But when you have bigger groups of lessers, especially in higher hazard, something that you can do is like do this kind of thing. Like imagine this line here, actually. Let me mark that. Like here there's a line of lessers along this path that I just painted. What you can just do is like this to clear them. It will cost you a lot of ink, but it will kill the cohorts as well as everything else. Especially useful on high tide, of course. Or narrow low tides like say Marinus Bay. And then I forgot if I've already mentioned it. When you roll, the range is very much comparable to Dualies. Do not know if the number is actually the same. It's like not super low and also not super high, but just fine to use the weapon somewhat normally. And I'm pretty sure it is lower than Tetras, if you're curious for that comparison as well. And the Tetras, that other dually that really wants to roll. It's not the only one, but anyway, you get the idea, but Tetra has longer range and much per second. No, lower fire rate, the damage per shot is the same, it's also 30. Alright, let's get into enemies. That I've already mentioned, you need to space yourself correctly. Like you see, this is already too far away here. It's easier, of course, when you have high ground of some kind. When you get low ground, better than try. As you like really know what you're doing and are aware of your surroundings and stuff. What you also want to avoid is that you like get hit while looking up. But of course, if you are aware, what you can do is like you can do this thing where you like quote-unquote roll in place. So that should clear around you. You can also use welds if you have welds. Anyway, speaking of looking up, there's also the fish stick matchup, which is very interesting. And there are, I guess, some mix-ups if you love that. Like different ones. One thing you can do is same thing as a splatter shot or most other dualies. Like you just roll under it and shoot up as the things are circling. Spacing for that is also pretty much as tight as it gets. But like it's not super hard, but you will notice it can be failed. Then what you can also do is climb up on the fish stick, on the fish stick, then you're just rolling off and Air Blast should one-shot it. Do not have to worry about the range or anything there. The things they have 34 HP, I believe, or 32, one of the two numbers. So it's exactly enough to not die to a shot here, so you would have to hit them with 2 shots. And when you're rolling, of course, fire rate is higher, so it's harder to miss. Yeah, if you can justify climbing on top, or if it's actually safer for you to climb on top, that's the other thing. Yeah, you can do that and first straight down with a roll, and it's... Unless you like are somewhere on the side, I haven't quite tested it yet. Because I just very recently thought of it. Any other noteworthy here? HP bosses, of course, use red fire. You can use incidental blasts as well. Careful with the ink as always. It's of course what you can do is just do this under them and get out again. It's pretty safe for the most part. Like whenever I die doing that, that's typically due to something else, but not the lid itself. Like in a rain or stinger or missiles or stuff like that. That is stuff you can just not dodge. Rolls, and in some cases not even with slash octoral armor. Which would be the rain fun fact. Armor does not work for rain. For missiles instead bombs though. Anyway, I digress, so get back to the here and these. Flyfish, of course, flyfish. Flyfish are also interesting here. So this explosion, it works against flyfish launchers. Weather positioning is strict, you do need to be above them. Like in the same way that the bomb trick works, like where you throw or roll rather a bomb edge of a ledge. Hits the flyfish from there. The rolls that work somewhat similarly. You can do it in mid-air, like by jumping at the flyfish and then doing the thing. Would work too, but you do need the high ground on the flyfish in the first place. If you cannot get the high ground, then you cannot do it with that. It's not quite as fixable as exposure there. And again, this is also the unfortunate part about the map that premiered this on. There do not seem to be easy setups readily available to do that to flyfish. But yeah, on multiple of our regular maps, certainly do have those. So very much looking forward to trying this out on, you know, a regular map. If we ever happen to get randomizer rotations, then that's just one weapon and not all of them. The mystery, of course, is still up with these patch notes. Whether that was a mistranslation or whether they actually mean what they say, but it's not for the run here, but only for randomizers following that. Okay, anyway, so much about normal enemies. Talk a bit about night waves. King, you of course do wanna focus a lot on Goldie DPS. Whenever no Goldie is out, you are also very good at clearing lessers. I mainly do that. About opening gashas, do it when it's free, but when it's not free, don't worry too much about it. Make sure the places stuff. On Mudmouth, focus on clearing the smaller lessers. Hopefully don't do the Cohawks. Unless the whole weapon set is bad with Cohawks, then definitely help the Cohawks. Mothership, use your rolls a lot so you can actually hit the Chinooks in our range. And of course help with clearing a bunch for this. To get missed and then let us get spawned and stuff. Then for Mothership damage, when you're not crabbing, also just be there. You're likely the highest DPS weapon in the comp, one of the highest. You're definitely out DPSing the Stamper for that specific case actually, because the Stamper has its DPS only on the ground but not in the air. You know what I mean, right? Right, then there's gorillas, and you can damage the gorilla like that, and you can do this quick roll in place when small fries are approaching you. But be aware of your position and that you can actually do it without dropping off stuff. It would be fairly easy on a ground set junction because you have the basket right next to you. Again, on spawning grounds, the other thing is the small fries got the first. Right, and then Rush. Rush is interesting. For the most part, you wanna do it the boring way and just use your road fire. It should get you through the jumps just fine for the most part. Not the goalies if you're soloing though. Hopefully teammates will help with that. You can also spawn camp with that if you're like playing high tide and go for really high scars. But of course be careful with the aggro change, and if you do not return like preemptively, then you might die there. The blasts, well, theoretically you would think they would be nice for Rush. Probably not practical. What you would ideally need is a setup where you can run place and do like this. Do it a bit slowly, if you will. You can do that for exactly 1 cycle. Then you have to retreat and refill, something like that. But yeah, it would need very specific positions to actually work. I cannot think of one off the top of my head. When you don't have that, just use the road fire and fine. And ink is of course also a very limited resource and it does not exactly give you room to breathe. What it asks of the team is basically for the team to not be all out of ink at the same time. You know, be aware of when your teammates are shooting things and don't shoot the exact same things. Exactly the things that they are not shooting and vice versa. Then whenever someone has things clearly under control, then take the time to refill and then again once they stop firing, just before they stop firing. That. Okay, this is basic Rush stuff at this point, and they of course do not mention that in weapon guides. Like, nothing special to say about Fog or Cohort Charge. It has like anything to do with the weapon. King Salmon it, you have good DPS. Hit the cursor, maybe hit the horror bars if you can get in range of the ball. If not, then the body during downtime, but only during downtime. Prioritize clearing of the Synthesis first. Or when you're like the kill. But again, this is also just the basic stuff for the most part. So yeah, that's everything about the Grizzco Dualies. Yeah, how would I rate the weapon? How strong is it actually in comparison to some others? I'd say it's like aggressively mid, I'd say. Okay, like it's, I guess, better than Splat Dualies. We could compare to Grizzco Blaster, where it's basically better for dealing single target damage against T-bosses. Worse for lessers because you cannot just stand there and blast them up, but have to do this kind of thing and use a lot more ink for it. The ranks roughly in a similar ballpark to the Grizzco Blaster Umbrella. And whether it's better or worse than I got personal preferences. But yeah, that is all I have to say about this. Have fun whenever it is.